Hi, my name is Dave Reske, and welcome to this edition of Marketing in the Now, where we focus on uncovering the myths and misunderstandings of marketing and leadership with some of the world's most interesting people. And my guest today is Warren Sukernek. Warren is a fractional CMO with 20 years of experience in B2B and B2C environments. Before starting his own fractional CMO practice, he was VP of Marketing at Flow Career, where he oversaw all marketing activities, including brand, web, thought leadership, demand gen, partnerships, and social media. Warren, welcome to the show.
Hi, Dave. Nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
Glad you're here. Really appreciate you taking the time. So, as you know, I like to start these conversations with what I call a myth-buster question. And you and I have been talking about this concept of product-led growth and how that's a very popular trend these days. And it kind of reminds me of the idea that it's almost an age-old idea that if we build a better mousetrap, the world will beat a path to our door, or maybe in a simpler view, if we build it, they will come. What do you think about that? Is that true? Can we build it and they will come without marketing support? How does that work?
I think that's the ideal, but even the best mousetrap or anything, like that, it really needs some propulsion to get discovered, right? And get found. And, in my opinion, that's really where marketing can come in to help any product, no matter how good or unfortunately how bad they are, get discovered, right? And get tried. So, product-led growth, I think, is a great concept, whether we're talking about, back in the day, we called it, a freemium model or, more of a, I guess, modern perspective, of really utilizing the product and then buying different features, as you use it. But discovery, is still critical, right? And that's where I think marketing can really help in that area.
So, why do you think people are coming back to this age-old idea that, we build it, they will come. We don't really need marketing after all. If we build such a great product, it'll really sell itself. Why do you think that that's such a seductive idea and marketing, is not necessary?
Oh, that's a good question. I think there's probably a number of factors. The product itself, right, is a lot more interesting, sexier than the advertising or the marketing, elements, right? Um, as a result, getting a customer's hands onto the product, we like to think, that, well, that will sell itself. And even more so, those customers will become apostles or evangelists to sell the product for us. Now, for the great products, that may be part of it, and that certainly helps. But, word of mouth marketing can certainly always use assistance, right?
Mm.
And help. And then the other element to your hypothesis, marketing, I think, gets a bad rap, is somewhat disrespected, as a function in that, in general, and I could go on for this, for hours, but in general, people don't like to be marketed to, right? They don't like advertising. If you think about just in you know, the popular media consumption, how many times do you turn off a commercial or leave the room to do something else when you're watching TV or on a streaming service, buy ad-free, right? You pay extra for that service, not to have commercials because people don't like or want, advertising. And I think, even in B2B marketing, it's the same, whether it's advertising or everyone has an opinion on what works and what sells. So at the bottom line, to kind of knit it all together, right? If we could design this product that just catches fire, right, and builds awareness and sells itself, we don't have to deal with the evil, marketers or advertisers. So I think that's really behind that whole concept.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So, people do disrespect marketing and we don't like ads until we want the thing that the advertising is selling us. Like if I'm in the
Sure,
market for
right.
camping gear and I'm not camping, then I don't want to see any of that stuff.
Mhm.
But if I'm really
Right.
trying to solve a particular problem and I need this new stove and I'm going camping, then I want the ad. So 98% of the time, maybe 99% of the time, a lot of our ads are not on the mark. So that creates this disrespect. And it is tempting. So I think there's a few examples, and maybe we could start with the positive. Are there examples you can think of where products took off and they were so powerful that they just took off without any advertising or marketing support? Has that ever happened? Or is that just, wishful thinking on the part of some people? Does that ever happen?
I think, I think it can happen and does happen. I mean, just, in some recent examples could be some, software tools, like Canva for, creative, right? For creating imagery, etc. Um, which is a great product-led growth story, by the way. Netflix too, you could say, right? But, you know, if you look into some of the detail behind it, there was a spark, right, or a match that really helped fuel that, and that was marketing. The other aspects too. Looking at it, you know, as customers, we all go on this journey, right? Whether it's from discovery and awareness to trial, which is where a lot of the PLG methodology or discussion comes in. But in order to get beyond trial, really, and really use the product, and then hopefully, to that point of view, evangelize the product, you need some communication to connect those phases, those stages of the journey. And honestly, a lot of that is marketing, life cycle marketing, where we help to move, customers through that journey to ultimately be buyers, rebuyers, and sellers for us. Right. So I think, yeah, there are some that maybe need less marketing than others, but for the most part, you need that spark, and then you need that ability to propel your buyer down the journey. Even for some of these really well-established, companies who we don't think need to do any marketing, like the two examples I gave, and plenty of others.
Yeah. So in those cases where you do have this amazing breakthrough product and this word of mouth, and maybe every product company wants to have that amazing product that is so different and so unique that everybody wants it. Maybe they don't have to do as much advertising support, but it feels like people often confuse advertising with marketing. And even in those product-led scenarios, it feels like those product-led companies are still benefiting from strategic marketing, positioning, good messaging, packaging, design, all of those other elements that mark kind of what I might call strategic marketing, rather than just maybe they're not doing as much advertising in the short term, but they're really doing marketing, from end to end. So, see, it feels like there's definitely a role for marketing to come alongside even phenomenal products.
Mhm. Without a doubt. And I think a big part of that that helps drive that, across that journey or life cycle is, you know, having the right content that resonates with the audience in the right channel at the right time, right?
Yep.
It's like you said earlier, 98% of the time, I may not need that company's product or service, but that 2% of the time, you want to have the recall, or you want to at least see it, when you need it, so you can, you know, get it.
Yeah. So if you have a great product and you have
Mm-hmm.
great strategic marketing, right? So you're positioned well, you understand the competition, you're messaging there,
Sure.
you have great content, you're really kind of telling the story well. you're kind of getting all of those elements out there. You get maybe a great website. You're kind of communicating all that in the non-advertising way. You probably do need to spend less on advertising than maybe you otherwise would have because you've done the strategic marketing well. And that can really make a big difference. But for products maybe that are out in the market today, let's say you've got a product that is out in the market and you just expect the word of mouth to happen by itself without advertising, without promotion. It's kind of it feels like companies are selling themselves short by not investing in those things properly. Do you see that as more of a trend today? People expecting it to grow without advertising? Or do you feel like most companies today understand that, well, no, you've got to do advertising and promotion in order to get past all the noise in the marketplace?
Wow, great conversation here. I think, well, two things. One, um, there's a lot of that perspective and mindset that if we make this great product fueled by the product-led growth methodology and mantra, right? We think we don't need this high cost, advertising and marketing. However, I think the strategic marketing elements are even more important there because it's so noisy, right? There's so much material out there, right? Vying for your attention that, it's really hard unless you've connected all the dots to create some very compelling, content that establishes credibility, right? Builds loyalty and trust, and ultimately, creates a very happy, customer or user of the product. Um, you know, Thinking that organic word of mouth, will sell your product. And typically, you talk to a lot of companies, large or small, or consumers, and ask, "How do you hear about this company?" Well, they'll think they say it's word of mouth. But if it's organic or really undirected, not directed, it's really not as optimized, as it certainly could be. So, from a word of mouth standpoint, things like reviews, referrals, excellent customer service, you know, all fall under this umbrella of more targeted or directed, word of mouth programs and campaigns that help those great products to sell themselves.
Yeah. And you need those in order to establish the credibility and support all the word of mouth. So all that can be good. But coming back to advertising for a second, I had an interesting conversation with a potential new client this week. And of course, we do digital marketing and advertising services for clients. And this was a technical services company. And I was trying to design an ad campaign using Google and LinkedIn. It was a B2B company to help drive their growth. And they've done a lot of things organically to grow their company and been very successful. And then I started to ask the question about, well, what is your and I was trying to come up with like an average cost per lead and cost per qualified lead. And then I started to ask, well, what is the value of a customer? And they said, well, on average, a customer will drive, like it'll be like $50,000 a year, and they'll stay with us for, an average of like 4 to 5 years. So, in other words, their value of a customer was a couple $100,000 per customer.
Yeah.
And so I started doing the math. And I'm like, well, the most expensive thing you can do is not advertise because you're leaving all of this money on the table. Maybe you can achieve some growth goals by not advertising, by just doing word of mouth. But think about how much more you could do if you advertise and got these other customers, because you could sell this thing to drive hundreds of thousands of revenue per customer. I don't know. Do you see people ever doing the math on how much money they're leaving on the table by not doing advertising and spending money on marketing to get there?
Yeah, I think it's astounding how little thought goes into the strategic elements, right? In capturing, the math and looking at, like you described, the lifetime value, right? and the acquisition cost and saying, okay, in your example, if the lifetime value is, say, $200,000, right? And you can spend a small portion of that, let's say 10%, 20K, right? And you have and I'm just doing the math in my head, which is dangerous, but let's say for that $20,000 investment, no matter how you spend it on marketing, advertising, you have some success, right? And let's say, I don't know, if it's a $50,000 product, you have a 10, maybe 5 to 10% success rate, in launch, your return on that ad spend on the 20K, will be significantly more that, you're going to add to your customer list. And then correspondingly, what if, they have a 4-year lifespan? What if through some assisted, advertising or word of mouth type of programs, they can extend that customer for another year,
Mm.
right? So now instead of 250, it goes up by 25, 15%.
Yeah. There are just massive,
Perspective like that.
yeah, there are just massive opportunities to grow that revenue and grow the business to be more effective. So I see a lot of, especially B2B companies have that kind of math and those kind of
Mhm.
opportunities, yet they're still skeptical to spend money on advertising and they would rather just have the product sell itself. What drives the skepticism? Have they been burned before? Have they been taken advantage of? Do they feel like advertisers are all charlatans? Are there too many options? Like, what is driving the skepticism on advertising with a lot of CEOs and
That's
C?
a great question because I see it, a lot. I think it's all those things, right? The bad perception of it, who was it? 100 or so years ago, Wanamaker said, you know, my 50% of my advertising is great, I think is kind of the quote,
Mhm.
but you don't know what that 50% is, right?
Mhm.
So there's a lot of wasted spend. There are so many different channels to do now. It's confusing, difficult and can be expensive. So it's a lot easier to invest in something that you understand, say, in your product to make it as, the best product it can be, right? And then think, well, I don't have to deal with advertising or marketing now.
Right.
Although we've established the fact that you certainly do, but right?
Yeah, you'd be better off investing in advertising in the right way. But I do think our profession is really filled with, I mean, there are definitely charlatans out there who will
Mm-hmm.
sell stuff that doesn't work, and people have been burned by that. And you can also do it badly, so you can spend money on advertising, and we do digital, and so we do these audits all the time, and we can go in and see how another agency or someone did it themselves badly, and we can say, hey, no,
Right.
if you've done it right, if you've done it well, if you've done it with us, you come out much better. But then there's also the other part where I don't know how to deal with this part where there's an infinite number of things you could do better, right? So whether you're
Sure.
in every campaign, and do you feel like executives feel like, well, I tried this, but then somebody else said I could have done it this way or could have done it that way, and it kind of gives them this feeling that there's just no way I can ever do it perfectly. So I might as well not even try.
Yeah, I would suspect um, because of the varying opinions, creating all of this discord out there, that the easiest thing to do, fueled by bad perceptions, is not to do it, right? You know, and maybe too often, as marketers, we do that to ourselves, even the good ones, where we call it as more art than science, right? I mean, digital and direct, sure, we need some great creative that definitely is more on the artistic side. But a lot of it, comes down to, being data driven, and analytical. And there is a lot of science to it.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's easier to rely on the art, which I think fuels that perception that I don't need an artist, I need a scientist.
Right. And so you definitely still need that creative
For
strategist
sure.
who could
Yeah,
put those really good campaigns together. Do you think that, there's a fear, and maybe this is part of human nature, there's almost sometimes a greater fear in making the wrong decision than making the right decision. And it's easy to make wrong decisions in marketing. So you're going to do campaign
sure.
tests, you're going to put this, so
Right.
you're always going to be wasting some money. And so it may be that fear that I'm going to make a wrong decision. So I don't really want to do anything because I know that there's going to be some waste, there's going to be some problems, going to be some loss here. Do you think that keeps people from kind of putting campaigns together or sustaining them well?
I think, there's definitely a part of that, and that I suppose fear creates that stagnation, right? Rather than, any kind of momentum. But, as you know, the good marketer, you always want to be testing, right? And failing in those tests, is a good thing because you can now optimize on really what's worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it does take a lot of uh fortitude, let's call it that, to be able to kind of go to your boss and say, hey, we spent $10,000. It didn't work because we ran these tests and they didn't work. So we're going to spend another $10,000
Sure.
on this test, right?
But if you say, we spent $10,000, it didn't work, we're not going to do that anymore. But within this test or this campaign, here's what we did find that was very interesting and worked. So let's, in a measured, manageable way, let's focus on those things that seem to have worked and expand them, for the next round.
Right.
That's, I think, a more compelling argument to me than saying, well, none of these things worked. Sorry, we wasted the money, but now I want more money to, test some other hypothesis. There's
Right.
only so many, swings you get up.
Yeah. So you have to take those swings. You have to be smart about them, and by working with smart agencies or smart people or great team members or great creative, you get a better shot at having wins, and then you kind of build on those wins, and hopefully you've got a winning formula that kind of builds the whole business, right? And then you've
Right,
got
for
a
sure.
get a way to grow the business. Because if you don't do that, if you just kind of focus on the earn side, you don't invest in marketing, then it feels like you're almost condemning your business to growing at a slower, more organic rate than it
Right.
could otherwise with marketing and advertising support.
Yeah. I mean, the proper marketing strategy, right, implemented by professionals, builds that inertia and keeps things going, even though, you know, it might be a very mature, situation, but, you know, good strategy can certainly continue the growth.
Right. So yeah, but having the strategy, having plan, having systematic investments in different advertising to do that. But that takes a lot of creativity and a lot of knowledge, right? So all the channels, and there are so many advertising channels. Where do you kind of go to think about kind of what are your go-to channels? Let's say you're working with a B2B client, um, software company perhaps. And so what are your go-to channels? Where do you always start? Where do you like to say, hey, these are really good bets for most companies. We're going to start
Mhm.
here, and then we're going to maybe expand and do some other tests as we go.
Yeah, sure. I mean, historically, what's worked, right? In my, tool bag, I've tried a number of different things for various different industries over my career. But as an example, one thing that consistently, works, whether it's 15 years ago or today, is strong email marketing with a, very well targeted audience and great creative,
Mm.
right? So we always start there, try to optimize it. Maybe the audience, for this segment, isn't proper. Maybe there's something we could do with the creative or the call to action, but that's a great starting point. And then, really doing an audit and looking at how does a company get their visibility, their awareness today? Is it on, social media channels like LinkedIn or Twitter? Is it, something else, like, I don't know, Reddit, for example, which is, really, I think, popular, even more popular today. Um, you know, is it event marketing? I mean, I worked, for example, at a low tech firm, introduced webinars to them, and as a result, we had a significant number of webinars, almost weekly. Yet at the end of the year, 2/3 of all opportunities were touched by a webinar. Now, webinars aren't anything new or secret, but it was a great way to deliver thought leadership content in a unique fashion that formed that back to that credibility and trust, right? Um, and drove a lot of trial and new customers and loyalty.
Yeah, so that's a great example of a strategy that really was successful there. It's so funny in my experience, I used to think that you could really, especially for smaller companies, you could go out with, one tactic,
Mm-hmm.
put all your eggs in one basket, and that would make it happen. And for us, it was almost always like SEO or paid search.
Sure. Yeah.
But increasingly, I just see the most successful thing happening when you're doing it all. You're doing great content like in webinars or podcasts like this, or, white papers or blogs, and you're doing paid advertising and search and other channels, and you're doing other earned media and social media or PR, and you're putting all that together and you're measuring the interaction between them. Do you see more and more companies creating that kind of that comprehensive strategy, or do you still see companies, want to kind of, go kind of get the magic bullet and get one thing that's just going to work and put all their eggs in one basket?
I think that diversification is growing, but I think also, though, there is certainly a impetus for that, magic bullet, the viral video, you know, kind of, theme. Um, but you mentioned a great point. No matter what the tactics are, that we use, right? Or we try, even if it's a really diversified portfolio of tactics, it all starts and comes down to, really great, exciting, compelling content,
Hmm.
right? So if you can focus on that and then deliver it in all of these channels, right? Enhanced, say on the digital side with SEO, as you mentioned, with the right keywords, or discover the right keywords, for SEO, and then do all the back end stuff, you'll get more backlinks. You'll get, more activity, better rankings with the great content that gets discovered, found, and shared.
Yeah.
So I'm a strong proponent of that for sure.
And that is such an important thing. And sometimes it feels like, a company will be focused on the campaign, the ad campaign. They want to think about the media buy, or
Yeah.
they want to think about, building a new website. And then later it's an afterthought. It's like, oh, what's that offer going to be again? And what's the content? Can we do any content? Anybody know how to write a white paper? And they kind of put that in at the end when I think what you're saying is that thought leadership idea, the offer, the great piece of content feels like that should become first. And then we figure out the best way to promote it. Right. And maybe it's the
Yeah,
product, right? The product.
right, for
Yeah.
sure. And
Yeah.
then repurpose it, as appropriate.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, there's so much there. I think that you and I probably both agree that the build it and they will come strategy will only take you so far, and marketing still has a role strategically, figuring out like where how to position, what the messaging is, what the content is, and in a promotional sense for how to really get it out there. So thank you, Warren. It's been a great conversation about that. If people want to connect with you later and talk more about this or your services or, how to work with you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Best way, simple, find me on LinkedIn, or shoot me an email at, simple warrenss@gmail.com.
It's great. Well, Warren, thanks again for taking the time today. I really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for having me.